Hare Krishna, good morning. Sorry to be 2 minutes late, but glad to be here. So I hope you're all been stuffed to the gills the last few days. Amazing, after all the feasts, everyone's still awake. The official garland. Thank you. Well, we'll begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this, there's a reason why this part of the Bhagavatam is so important. And I'll try to give a context to it. First, it sets the stage. And there are, in here, Suta Gosvami is with the sages of Naimisharanya, and they're asking him these questions. And that's in the previous chapter. I know you've studied that, but trying to understand, age of Kali is coming. What do we do? What do we actually do? Knowing well that the age has begun, we are assembled in this holy place to hear at great lengths the transcendental message of God. Now, we'll take a vote. We live in a democracy. How many of you think the age of Kali is a bad thing? How many think it's a good thing? How many don't think? Try to get everybody involved. Well, I'll give you the answer. You're all correct. It's a bad thing and a good thing. I mean, the bad thing is, it's Kali. When back in the 80s, when the 12th canto was being translated by Hridayananda Maharaj, I was actually producing the books, literally the typesetting machines and everything it takes to make a printed volume. And when I was reading the manuscript for the 12th canto, I actually chuckled a little. I said, wow. Now remember, all the cantos are in the present or past tense except the 12th canto, which a lot of it's in the future tense. So I was predicting what it's going to be like, and I kind of chuckled. I said, well, I'm never going to see that. Turns out it did happen. I'll give you an example. We'll get to the verse. It used to be there were political leaders, let's say, were really trusted by the people, really adored. I remember when Kennedy was president, he was adored. He might have had his flaws, but he was very good. He stood up to Khrushchev in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then Khrushchev decided, this is a man I can trust. Let's end this stupid Cold War. And I know this because Khrushchev's son actually spoke at the University of Florida. He was like a teenage boy during these times and had full reign of the Kremlin. And he said, let's end the Cold War. Then, of course, Khrushchev was deposed and Kennedy was assassinated. But the idea was there were leaders who people generally trusted. And it's very common among political leaders, unfortunately, for them to be engaged in various affairs. And I don't mean affairs of state, I mean affairs in the state. And it's fairly common. And it would never be discussed. It was their private life. Now, everything is very, very public. And there was a time when let's say America, Republicans and Democrats would talk to each other. They would actually be opposite parties, and sometimes competition is good. They would talk to each other. And then in the 90s, one Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, declared, he was Republican at that time, doesn't make a difference, Republican or Democrat, it's the same problem. He declared any Republican who cooperates with a Democrat will lose their committee assignment. If you don't have a committee assignment, you can't bring home the money to your congressional district, and that hurts your reelection. He declared it publicly, boldly. They're the enemy. And this is the mode of passion, where people became friends and enemies. And now we find leaders all over the world are generally despots, dictatorships. There's practically a revolution somewhere every week, a coup d'etat, something going on. And and this is all predicted in the 12th canto, that Kali will be a rough time. It's also the best of times. So to paraphrase Charles Dickens, it's the best of times and the worst of times. And what book did he begin in a similar way? Tale of Two Cities, that's right, yeah. So why? Well, because it's very easy to become somewhat detached from the world nowadays. The world kind of is a rough place. I mean, a tiny percentage of the population has an overwhelming majority of the money. Anytime that has happened in history, things haven't worked. When that happened during the Industrial Revolution, what happened? Can somebody tell me what philosophy developed when there were a few very rich and everyone was very poor? What philosophy became prominent? Communism. That's where Karl Marx came from, though I prefer Groucho Marx. Anytime there's been that discrepancy and it gets larger and larger, it ferments, basically people lose trust and something got to give. So this is Kali Yuga. The advantage of Kali Yuga is the only way to have peace is to go deeper. One time, Prabhupada was invited to a peace rally in New York in the early days. And there was a lot of anti-Vietnam War activity going on. When Prabhupada came to America, Vietnam War was building up. Some wars, you just can't understand why we would be in such a stupid war, but we were in Vietnam. The war began, there was the North Vietnamese, allegedly in the Gulf of Tonkin, off the coast of North Vietnam, attacked American vessels. And America reacted with great anger. And now we will bomb the hell out of Vietnam. There's never been a country since World War II that has been carpet bombed. So we just bomb it back into the dark ages. Because an American ship was never attacked. It came out later that it never was attacked. It was just an excuse. And so these things happen. And so there was a lot of anti-war sentiment in those days. Most of us who became devotees then had one foot in the anti-war movement because it just didn't make sense, me included. And then Prabhupada was invited to a peace rally. And he said, we don't have much interest in these things. Now, why would Prabhupada, who's such a saintly person, not have interest in a peace rally? I was curious. Well, why is that? Yeah.
I feel that like peace rallies kind of, they're a lot more tied to governmental affairs and less on Krishna. And Prabhupada is so like ahead, he's so advanced spiritually that he sees Krishna above all things.
Almost. You're almost there. The thing is that Prabhupada said it's a peace rally, but unless you recognize who the owner is, you can't have peace. Unless you see things in relation to God, you're not going to have peace. You're going to end up fighting among each other. I remember one incident where we were getting trained how to protest. So we had the Quakers come in. Quakers are very famous for nonviolence. They we're kind of in the Gandhian tradition that way. So a Quaker group came into our campus and they're training us how to do major protests without violence. And there's an art to it. I was thinking, this is really interests me. I'm really into this. And so there I am attending, and the head guy, you'll see his face, who was doing the training. Every time there was a break, he was hitting on the co-eds like anything. Just like anything, hitting on them. And I was thinking, yeah, but he spells peace different than I do. It was really nasty. And this wasn't the peace formula I was looking for, because unless we have a transcendental view of things, unless we're seeing the big picture, we get caught up in these kind of details. So Prabhupada thought, what good is going to a peace rally when they don't have a formula for peace? Prabhupada said, we can go to the peace rally, but the only way we can go is to chant Hare Krishna, because that will give people some peace. It turns out he was right. Okay, so we'll continue. I'm trying to set the context here. So in this context, Suta Goswami is saying, well, in Kali Yuga, what do we do? In other yugas, people knew what to do. They were much more in the mode of goodness. They just knew what to do. You study Shastra, you do rituals, you do this, you do that. They kind of knew what to do to live a peaceful, simple life. Sometimes we wonder if there were great civilizations in the past, well, why don't we see a lot of evidence? Because great civilizations in the past lived simply. Simple as that. They live simple. A great civilization is the Echo Village, not New York. So to continue here, text 30, say Evadam Sasartha Jay Bhagavanatma Maya Yad Sarasraya Rupaya Kasho Gunamaya Guno Vibhu. In the beginning of material creation, the absolute personality of Godhead in his transcendental position created the energies of cause and effect by his own internal energy. And I'm not going to do the verse spontaneously because there's just time shortage. The position of the Lord is always transcendental. Why? Because the causal and effectual energies required for the creation of this material world were also created by him. He is unaffected, therefore, by the qualities of the modes. His existence, form, activities, paraphernalia, all existed before the creation. He is all spiritual and has nothing to do with the qualities of the world, which are qualitatively distinct from the spiritual qualities of the Lord. Now, listen to this. He created the energies of cause and effect. What do scientists do? Exactly. We see an effect. We try to figure out the cause. You have a disease. What's the cause? Well, I know what the cause is. It's overeating at the festival. But anyway, so we study cause. The whole world is on cause and effect. The doorbell rings. What's the cause? Somebody's there. We think of everything. What is required for cause and effect? What factors required for cause and effect to make sense? Time. You need time. Now, time is an energy of Krishna. So in the spiritual world, you have events and sequences, but not cause and effect. Now, here's how it looks materially. If I had a super quantum computer, which hasn't been invented yet, may never be invented. I had the most super duper of quantum computers. For all of you who have a computer, quantum computers are many thousands of times faster. They just don't quite work. But theoretically, many, many thousands of times faster. And in little tests, there's some works. And one day there may be quantum computers. So it's all theoretically very possible. So you have the best quantum computer, and you fed in every piece of data there is. Does that mean you can predict everything that's going to happen in the world? That you can predict what my next word will be? Everything is cause and effect. Of course, that takes out free will, takes out love, takes out beauty. It takes out a few minor things like that. But that means that is the gross materialist view of the world, that everything is governed by cause and effect. There are causes and effects. I mean, whenever we study Newtonian physics, I know many of you are pool sharks, or might have been in the past. You play a game of pool, what are you doing? You're hitting one ball against another, cause and effect. And you're trying to get the ball to go into a pocket. Who here has ever played pool? Oh my gosh. Who here was good at pool? Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. So now you know, now that we've had our confessionals, who is still good at pool? Oh, no, never mind. Don't have to answer. Okay. So that's the billiard ball, cause and effect. Now, our dear late Sariputta, the greatest scientific genius of the movement and even beyond, wrote a paper once. And the paper is published in a book, God and Science. In this paper, he analyzed how the laws of physics could work and you could still have God. You have cause and effect and you still have God. Now, I'll explain it, how it worked in a moment. A fascinating paper. So in the 80s, I had a center at the College of Worcester in Ohio, very nice college town. Here is the abbreviation of the College of Worcester is CAL. And they college had Methodist religion's origins, but then became secular. It was the only college in all of America that sends a recruiter every year to Lahore and Calcutta to give undergraduate fully paid scholarships to South Asians. And so they had some endowment to do that. Maybe the idea was we can make the Hindus into Christians. I don't know the origin, but usually that's what it was. So you had this college that was some connection with India, some very deep liberal arts college with deep religious sentiments. And then you have the religion department. And the religion department, as is typical, was headed by an atheist. It's almost always that way, believe it or not. I mean, it's rare, it's the rare exception, it turns out. Been many years in the American Academy of Religion, and I'm amazed by that phenomena, but it's true. It's true here, UF. So they invited Sariputta to speak in the chair of the department, and they gave him an honorarium and flew him up. And the chair of the department goes, okay, remember now our rule. Faculty, you may not ask any questions until the students have finished theirs. This is for the students, not for us. Faculty, be quiet. Remind him of the rules. He was very strict. Sariputta gave his lecture. At the end, the professor said, to hell with my rules, and just machine gunned Sariputta with questions. He was so disturbed by what Sariputta said, because he talked about cause and effect. So what did he say? This is hurricane season. Anybody know the story of hurricanes and chaos theory? Anybody who's familiar with that? Okay. Go, Paul, you're familiar with that. So you know that story. Yes, you're familiar with that. the butterfly effect. So why don't you describe the butterfly effect?
So actually, I was having a conversation about the butterfly effect here like a week ago with Gayatri and some other folks. But it's the principle is exponential amplification. So what that means is like you have, you might think like, oh, like you look at the weather report and it says it's going to rain later, and then you go out and it's fine later, and you're like, whoa, why can't the meteorologists just tell us what the weather is? Like, why can't they do that? And the answer is that you can have these tiny little events that happen, like, a butterfly flapping its wings and like a tiny little gust of air. And then because of the natural systems of the world and of pressure and temperature and humidity and everything, that tiny little cause, let's say, gets amplified very, very many times and can turn into a large tornado on the other side of the world, given enough time and the right conditions. So it's like so the butterfly effect is like little butterfly flaps its wings, and then on the other side of the world, there's a huge tornado, and that happens because the little, butterfly flapping its wings, that little air puff becomes exponentially amplified.
So, well, thank you. That helps. Well, the specific example is there's a little dust devil in the Sahara Desert. They happen all the time. And some of these dust devils then become well-formed and drift into the ocean, where it picks up the heat and it turns into hurricane. We right now have Hurricane Lee, just did that, came from the African Sahara, went into the Atlantic, and now it's a Category 5 that is not headed to us. It's headed to places that deserve it more. Anyway. But it's gonna, it's actually on a beeline to us, but it's gonna veer north is the prediction. So this is, how do we know it's gonna veer north? Cause and effect. So you have this hurricane, the little dust devil, and a butterfly goes by the dust devil. In an infinitesimal amount, that little flapping of the wings changes that dust devil ever so slightly. And that can determine, does a hurricane hit New Orleans that really deserves it, or Gainesville that obviously doesn't? And that, now, how do they know this? Well, what happened was one meteorologist was calculating the path of hurricanes. And for those of you who are math inclined, you know the story of significant figures. How many decimal places make sense? And he had realized this was done when computer time was time shared. Their computers were mainframes, not desktops, and you only had so much time on the computer. And he realized we're spending a lot of this valuable computer time running a model out to 30 decimal places, but we can only measure to 10 decimal places the speed of wind. You can't measure to 30 decimal places. I mean, I'm making the specific numbers up, but this is the idea. You can't measure. So he was doing this model, and it showed the hurricane hitting New Orleans. And then he chopped off 20 decimal places you couldn't even measure with the best instruments you can even mentally think of. You can never measure that precise. And he chopped off the decimal places. Now let's run the model, and it'll use a lot less computer time. Instead of the hurricane hitting New Orleans, it hit Miami. My God, what happened here? We can't even measure these causes, and it has that big effect. It's like a snowball effect. You get a little ball of ice rolling down a hill, and when it gets to the bottom, it's as big as this room. That sometimes happens in avalanches. So you have that snowball effect. So he said, we can't even measure it. So this is chaos theory, that there's some things that go on in nature that are beyond what we'll ever be capable of measuring. Not right now, ever be capable, because it's beyond anything you can imagine being measurable. So therefore, there are causes and there are effects, but we can never quite measure the causes. So the idea is I have my super quantum computer and I wire everyone's brains into it, like in some science fiction movie, to make it more powerful. And then we add Shruti's brain and, okay. Yes, so, and with this super powerful thing, but it could never predict everything that happens. So this means that God could, by his glance, remember, God just looks at things to make it happen, change things, and the laws of nature all are still working, because he's working in that level that we can never measure. So Sariputta wasn't proving there was God. That was not his proof. His proof, he was just saying there is a way for God to be controlling everything and the laws of nature to still be working. They're not contradictory. And that was the big problem with science and religion. Well, if God can control everything, why is there evil? Why is this? Why is that? And how could God do it? And we know from Newtonian mechanics, we can calculate everything. We don't need a God. Hey, God is dead, said Nietzsche. We don't need it. So he gave this paper. And the atheist professor of the religion department, like I said, they're always atheists, was so upset by it. He kept peppering with questions. And of course, Sariputta answered every question very well, which got this guy even angrier. Finally, he ran out of steam and let the students ask their questions, and they loved it. So I want to focus on, there's 4 verses today, on the cause and effect verse, because it's very important. And cause and effect, of course, requires time. And time, according to the Gita, is an energy of Krishna. Now, when we study classical physics, we think of time as immutable. But as many of you know, if I would put a very good watch on, and my twin brother would, which I don't have, but if I had one, would put on identical watch, and he would go up to the International Space Station and stay up there for 6 months and come back, his watch and my watch will not give the same time. Because time is an energy and has some relativity. This is exactly what we're going to see in the Bhagavatam in the 2nd and 3rd canto. Einstein time dilation is extremely prominent. So we're going to go on to some more verses. After creating the material substance, the Lord expands himself and enters into it. Although he was within the material modes of nature and appears to be one of the created beings, he is always fully enlightened in his transcendental position. The Lord, as super soul, pervades all things, just as fire permeates wood. So he appears to be of many varieties, although he's the absolute one without a second. God has many names. Some people have trouble with that. Why would God have many names? Well, I have many names. I'm Brahma, I'm Bob. My grandkids have a name for me. Some people have names for me I can't repeat here. These things happen. We all go by many names. My son's a federal narcotics agent chasing the cartels. So he has his guns and machine guns and all these things, and the criminals are quite scared of him. He's been very successful. But when he comes home, his kids just hug him. Guns mean nothing to them. Just hug him. So we can see that God's like that. He can be in different forms to different people. So that's what's going on here. The super soul enters and embodies the created beings who are influenced by the modes of material nature, cause them to enjoy the effects of these modes. Why? Because it's what we want. We're getting our desires satisfied. Thus, the Lord of the universe maintains all planets inhabited by demigods, men, lower animals, assuming the roles of incarnation forms, pastimes to reclaim those in the mode of pure goodness. So there are innumerable universes, and each and every universe are innumerable planets inhabited by different grades. So, kind of innumerable universes. Now, at the Bhaktivedanta Institute, we're actually drilling down on this very statement right now. What does innumerable universes mean in relation to the Webb telescope? When we look out there, and every time the Webb telescope discovers something new, I've seen this headline every week since it went up, oops, our theories need to be revised constantly. We can't explain this, something we don't know. So there's huge, in other words, the more we know, turns out the less we understand it. So there's something going on. That's okay. That's how science often works. So what does it mean, innumerable universes? And what does the word universe is actually, here, Prabhupada is using the word lokan, like loka, planet. Sometimes it refers to planets. We say jagat. Sometimes jagat is translated as world, sometimes as universe. So we have Sanskritists and astronomers and astrophysicists all at this moment while we speak, trying to unpack this. So you'll have to stay tuned for what all this means, but we're trying to deeply understand it. But the idea that the Lord creates many universes is so cool. There was once a book came out in the 70s. It was an anti-cult book. Now, fortunately, we had good company. They were after priests, and not just us. They were after almost anybody who did anything religious. This book came out. So there was a chapter on us. Felt complimented. And so I looked at it, and the first part of the chapter really amazed me. And it said this: can you imagine the God of the Krishnas? He breathes out innumerable universes just lying on a bed. Ever hear anything so ridiculous? And I was thinking, yeah, that's the kind of God I want to worship. That's cool. That's good. This is a good thing. So I was thinking, boy, this person sure got it wrong. They were so envious that they couldn't lie on a causal bed and breathe out innumerable universes. And again, going back to the BI, we're seeing there are innumerable, whatever a universe means, we're not quite sure, but innumerable galaxies and universes. There's so much out there. I mean, it's incredible. And when you see it, the first thing I see is, wow, it's like the first thing I see when I look at the painting of Nrsimhadev is, I'm not seeing the chemicals that make up the paint and what the pigments are and the dyes and what that material is and what the frame is made of. I'm seeing an artist behind it. So this is sometimes the problem we face at BI. The scientists are much more concerned with the pigment that's in that canvas than they are with the artist who made the painting. So we're trying to, as we're going to go on the next Christian source of all incarnations, and in the next canto, especially third canto, we're going to go on into creation stories. And a lot of that creation story is to give you a certain amount of awe. Hey, who is behind this? I want to know. Who here has seen the Mona Lisa? It wasn't that impressive, actually. It was nice, but I've seen it, the Mona Lisa. And but there are typically long lines to see this painting. It's in a bomb-proof frame, plexiglass and glass. I mean, it's one of the most valuable paintings in the world. You want to see it. But only the greatest of nerds would say my whole interest in Mona Lisa is which paint did he use. I wonder, there's so many books written. Who was it modeled after? How did he get that smile? What's the mystery behind it? I want to know what the author's thinking. It's to give that sense of awe is why people are so attracted to it. Who here has seen the Mona Lisa? Christina, what did you think?
Yeah, it was kind of smaller than I was expected.
Yeah, much smaller.
Yeah, and there was just like tons of people, and there's glass in front of it, so it's like a little bit dark. It's kind of hard to see. But I was like, wow, that's a painting.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hugo, is your hand raised? Nice to see you here.
Hare Krishna, pleasure to see you, Prabhu.
And congratulations, I think, on your
thank you very much.
Finishing your ability to blow up the world. No, maybe.
I'll stop by the BI this weekend to help you out with your nuclear reactor. I know that the duct tape's starting to fall off, so.
Okay, good.
Same reaction with the Mona Lisa, just very, very unimpressive. I got to see it at the Louvre in France, and it's like there's this massive hallway on the way to the Mona Lisa that just, the walls are just absolutely filled with all kinds of paintings, all kinds of times, all kinds of artists, beautiful paintings, and everyone's just going past all of them to this one room that's like 3 or 4 times bigger than our temple room at the Alatra temple. And it's just for the Mona Lisa. And you just have this wall and the Mona Lisa and this massive line, and it's mind-boggling to see how people interact. It's one of many.
What I found very interesting about the Louvre is each floor has a different century. So when you go in the Dark Ages, 1500, paintings are dull. And life is miserable during the Dark Ages. Then when the Renaissance comes, you start seeing the paintings get color and life and excitement. They never reach the excitement I see in the paintings in this very room, for example. But they start getting some life to it. You see they're coming out of that age when people were not allowed to read. The only people who were allowed to read were the priests who learned reading because they control the Bible, and that was really the only book. And of course, Gutenberg invented the movable type and the press, and things started changing in the 1400s, 1500s, like that. And then as you go to each floor, you see how it changes. And then when you get to the 20th century, it goes back downhill again. You get, at least my taste, more modern art that I'm not sure what I'm looking at. It gave me a different message. Anyway, that was an interesting sequence. So let me stop here and see if there are any questions or comments. What's going on? Yes, Prabhu.
2 quick comments. The first one is in the beginning of the class, you spoke about peace rallies and peace formula.
Yeah.
And it just made me think of modern politics. And we have this real artificial dualism between liberal and conservative, red and blue, Republican and Democrat. And, I would just always think to myself, you also mentioned there's 2% that have all the wealth and power.
Yeah.
And it's really convenient for them that we're divided into this artificial dualism where we're just constantly like dogs barking at each other.
Absolutely.
It's quite distracting. And I urge everyone here to, as devotees, we're supposed to cultivate Brahminical qualities, which includes just being broad-minded and being able to hear someone else out and have dialogue. So I encourage everyone not to place yourself so firmly in one of those 2 camps, like reject those artificial molds and just be able to hear other people out. So I just wanted to say that. And then I also wanted to ask, on this topic of not being able to measure everything and the limits of our empiricism. So I remember in university we learned about, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Quine, William von something Quine, who wrote about, he was a scientist, a mathematician, but he also wrote philosophical ideas about just the limits. And he was writing about how experiments, we can try and control them, but there's always uncontrolled variables. And our theories are just like, we're just reaching in the dark, and sometimes the theories work out, but we don't really know why it's working out.
Well, some science, you all have your laptops. We know science works well. It's where the weakness comes. Prabhupada said, the scientists, when he gave the first instructions to the BI, said, these scientists are very proud. He says, and they have a reason to be proud. They've done something amazing. So treat them, told Suta Gosvami, with special respect. And then you'll win them over, which actually worked. There I am in Mayapur in 96 for Suta Gosvami's international conference he did in Calcutta. And I'm sitting next to Professor Towns, who won the Nobel Prize for the laser beam. He's there. And then he invites me to travel with him. We go to Mayapur together and tour Mayapur, and he loves it. Pious guy. And I invented the laser. And without that, I mean, there'd be no laser players and no video games, and we'd all be in trouble. So, and then as far as it goes with the politics, there was a great book I read by a very expert sociologist named Jonathan Haidt. He wrote a book, The Righteous Mind, Why the Left and Right Can't Understand Each Other. And I don't know, anybody here has read that book? I do a lot of mediation work, you know, at GraceCon and outside, and so it was a very important book. Here's what happened. He was a Jewish liberal from the University of Pennsylvania, believing in every left-wing cause you could think of. Then he won a Rhodes Scholarship, and he was sent to Orissa, India. Orissa is one of the most conservative places in all of India. I lived right near there, I'm very familiar. Very, very conservative. And his host family is upper middle class family, meaning they have servants and all. And every time a servant would do something for him, if a servant did something for you, what would you say? Yes, and his host kept reminding him, we don't thank our servants. Then his mind's screaming at him. Haidt's mind's going crazy. Then it's time for meals. Well, how do you do meals in a very conservative part of India? The men eat, and then the women eat. And his mind is screaming, he's egalitarian. This is unacceptable. This is horrible. What's wrong with this country? And his mind screaming at him every day for a month until he had an epiphany. And after a month, he realized, wait, the women are very happy. The servants are very happy. Everyone treats each other respectfully. No one's complaining. Everyone's taken care of. This works for them. It doesn't work for me. It's never going to work for me, but it works for them. Then he had this epiphany why the left and right don't understand each other, because they have a different value system. A friend of mine was a chair of the Democratic Party in this area. And he asked my opinion one time on national politics. So I gave him my opinion. And he said, he's a big Democrat. He said, boy, did you get it right. And my opinion was, Republicans are mean and Democrats are stupid. He said, you got it right. Now, some issues, I feel pretty strongly that one side has it right. Other issues, the other side might have it right. And some issues, none of them have it right. There are ways to look at it. But when devotees get involved in partisan politics, they invariably will drop out of the mode of goodness into the mode of passion. What does mode of passion mean? There are friends and there are enemies. Yes.
So just following up on that, it just kind of occurred to me that the political, friends and enemies thing can also extend to this idea of like religion versus science, where it's like if you feel like, oh, well, I have to take a side, there's like religion and there's science and they can't be friends and it's either one or the other, and then that also seems to me to be the mode of passion.
Very much so. We all need philosophy. Let's substitute that for religion for the moment, the term, and we need science. The reason why the Bhaktivedanta Institute works is because we combine science and philosophy. That's what Prabhupada gave us. Here, I'll read from my conversation with Prabhupada for a moment. So, I asked Prabhupada, well, what is a good scientist? He said, somebody who knows things as they are. So Prabhupada said, know things as they are. I said, well, nobody really knows. I was thinking, nobody really knows the whole truth. So I says, he thinks he knows things as they are. He hopes he knows things as they are. Prabhupada says, no, he's supposed to know. We approach the scientist because he's supposed to know things correctly. Science would mean one who knows things as they are. And somebody else says, is Krishna the greatest scientist? Why? Because he knows everything. The scientist is the one who knows the subject matter thoroughly, Prabhupada says. He's a scientist. Krishna knows everything. So then I say, well, I'm presently a science teacher in India. Prabhupada goes, just teaching. Unless you have perfect knowledge, how can you teach? That is your question. Without perfect knowledge, though, you can teach. You can teach something. Prabhupada goes, that is cheating. That is not teaching. Calling me a cheater. That is cheating. Just like science say, there was a chunk and the creation took place. Perhaps, maybe, what is it? Simply cheating. It's not teaching. So, Prabhupada says you can teach up to the point you know. And Prabhupada's point was, you can teach. I could teach science, but only to the point I know. Don't go beyond what I know. So when scientists say, well, we've done a radiometric calculation, and it may be that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, which happens to be one day of Brahma, so you can kind of understand that one. Okay, that's a piece of knowledge. They've done some analysis. It could very well be correct. And then they say, and all life began with a lightning bolt striking a pyramidal soup of whatever volcanoes produced in the primitive earth, and then out of it popped Brihat Mridanga. Out of this, kind of started off as some amoeba, but then we get here, and then we reach the Sunam Bonum, and we reach Shruti, and so these, that is what they don't know. That there's no observation of it. It doesn't make sense. The cause and effect doesn't work. They're speaking beyond what they know. So the key is for scientists to speak what they know, but when they get into realms that only can be understood by philosophy, take the beginning of the universe, cosmography. We're having a major BI seminar on this on November 17th. All of you are going to be invited to help with our many guests. And then you get a free ticket to listen. It's fine to say this is our speculation of how things could have begun, but then to reach the conclusion, the atheist conclusion, is a problem. I'll give an example, something called fine-tuning. Anybody heard that phrase in relation to the beginning of the universe? Of course, Christina knows that well. There are certain constants, the Planck constant and other numbers and speed of light and certain physical constants. And if one of these constants was off in the 10th decimal place, 10th place right decimal point, according to the modern theories, the universe would collapse, it wouldn't work. According to math, we wouldn't be here. So the best of the cosmologists, and even the most atheist of the cosmologists, all admit that there has to be these numbers to begin with. Well, what are numbers? Numbers come from intelligence. They don't come from nothing. So where does that come from? That's the philosophical question. None of us have a time machine to go back and witness it. So a good scientific theory has to be falsifiable. There has to be something that if it didn't work, we reject the theory. That's just how science works. This one is so they come up with their unfalsifiable theories, which we call speculations. Now, if the theory has when I see these theories, I say, wait, there's some intelligence behind it. Obviously, the famous example is when you see a watch, everyone knows there's a watchmaker. In my case, his name is Apple. Okay, so with that, we're a little over time. I hate starving people, and you have a bunch of people to feed today. Any last minute comment? Or if not, we'll stop here. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure being at Krishna House. Hare Krishna.